guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to Bookmas Day 8. I have been seeing this video for a while, and I know a lot of people have been doing it since it's almost 2024, which is just crazy. But that is the 23 favorites of 2023. So I'm going to go through the 23 books that are on my top of this year. I feel like a lot of these books I have talked about. You can kind of see one series. Spoiler. I'm going to start with fantasy first because I have less fantasy over romance. So let's just talk about the one you already know. The Acotar series. The whole series is a 5-star series for me. I absolutely devoured these books. Every single book. So good. The first one, A Court of Thorns and Roses. I'm sure this is one that you've seen probably everywhere. But this is the first book in the series, and it's not completed. So there's still other books that are going to be coming out. When the next book comes out, it's going to be craziness. This one is a story about Feyre, and she is a huntress, and she accidentally kills a wolf or a fairy, and she kind of has to repay the debt of killing a fairy. So she goes into the Fey worlds. And that's pretty much all I'm going to say about it, because I know this is a very popular book, so I don't want to spoil anything. But then the second book is A Court of Mist and Fury, and they just get thicker as they go on. So be prepared for that. But this is just more about Feyre's story. And then we have A Court of Wings and Ruin. This one is also very thick. But this one is also about Feyre's story. And then we have a little fun novella, A Court of Frost and Starlight. This takes place during winter solstice, so this is just a fun palate cleanser, and you don't really have to think too much about what's going on when you're reading this. And it's definitely a good break between A Court of Wings and Ruin and then the big book, A Court of Silver Flames. This one is like crazy long, almost 800 pages. In this one you get a different point of view. It's not Feyre's story anymore, but I still really enjoyed it. The whole series, I definitely recommend it. If you're new to fantasy, I would definitely start with acotar because it doesn't take much brain power to read it, and there's not a lot of world building, which I feel like that's what gets confusing if you're not used to reading fantasy. And then I have another series. I read the first one last year, so I'm not going to count that. That is Legendary and Finale. These are two of the Caraval trilogy books, and I 100% recommend this. This is just like a cozy fantasy. It's not like too much world building, just like acotar isn't. So the first one, you get introduced to Scarlet and Donatella. This one is told in Donatella's point of view. Each book is a new Caraval, which is like a made-up, or it's not a made-up game, but it's a fake game that makes you feel like it's real in reality. And then the third one is, well, I can't really say who it's about without spoiling anything. So you're just gonna have to pick up these books and read them. And I'm sure you've seen the Once Upon a Broken Heart and The Ballad of Never After. I'm sure you've seen those books everywhere, and they are related to this series. So I definitely recommend to read this trilogy first before you go into the Once a Broken Heart trilogy, because you see one of the main characters in that book in this trilogy, and I love these books. Like, I was so sad when they were over, but I'm really excited to read the next trilogy. And then the last fantasy book is Dance of Thieves. This is a duology, and I read this maybe a couple months ago, I think. The first half, or first 25%, it takes a little bit to get into, but the last half, I just flew through it. Like, I could not wait to know what happened next. And I really need to read The Vow of Thieves, which is the second book in the series, because the way this book ended, I was like I needed to read it. This is a really good duology. It doesn't take much brain power at all either. So really, any of these fantasy series, I definitely recommend. And now into my top romance books of the year. The first one is Behind the Net by Stephanie Archer. I literally talk about this book all the time. I really recommend it. It is a hockey romance between a hockey player and his assistant, but they went to high school together. So it's not really a second chance, but they knew each other before, and it's really cute. It is also a series. The Fake Out came out a couple weeks ago, so I still have to read that one, and I'm sure it's going to be up there in the ratings with this one as well, because I just love all of Stephanie Archer's books. And speaking of Stephanie Archer, I have two other books, That Kind of Guy and The Wrong Mr. Right. This is part of the Queen's Cove series. This one is a fake dating trope. They're kind of using each other to benefit for different things. But he's running for mayor and she is trying to own her own restaurant, so they're kind of working together, and it was just a really cute story. And then this is the second one. This is about Hannah and Wyatt. This one, he is being her dating coach and giving her tips on how to date, because she is used to just kind of being by herself. She owns a bookshop, and I really enjoyed that part because she's trying to save her bookshop because it's not doing too well, and I really liked that part as well. And I liked how he also helped her with that. But I always love when like the main character owns a bookstore, because that would just be a dream. But yeah, I definitely love the series. I can't wait to read the other two that came out. And then Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. This one is about Elsie and Jack. They are rivals, so it's enemies to lovers. So she's a theoretical physicist and he is an experimental physicist. So they kind of like clash because they take different approaches. I like how she writes the STEMinist rom-coms, because there's no other author that writes like this. And I don't really understand science as much as some people probably do, but she makes it so enjoyable to read. If you don't know what she's saying, like, she's good at explaining it so you understand. But yeah, enemies to lovers, they end up working together, and I love the main characters as well. And then we have The Love Wager by Lynn Painter. This was just a cute, fun rom-com, and they make a wager on who can fall in love first, and they fall in love with each other in the meantime. I remember just reading this and I was just like laughing to myself the entire time because the main characters are just so funny, and the way that Lynn Painter writes is just like, there's no other author that can write like this, because she is just the queen of rom-coms. And then we have another queen, Emily Henry, Happy Place. I love this book. I loved all of her books, really. And I just saw that she announced that this is coming out in paperback next year. I don't think they set a date, but it's coming out in paperback in 2024, which I think all of us are going to end up buying it, because I had to just buy this because I couldn't wait any longer. I felt left out, and I really am glad that I read this. This is about Harriet and Wynne. It's basically like a second chance. So they go on a trip with their friends that they go on every year, but they have to pretend that they're still together because their friends don't know that they are not together anymore and have been separated for a while. And I think that Emily Henry just writes the best books ever. Like, the way that she is able to bring emotions out into her novels is just amazing, and she definitely gets you to feel all of the emotions while you're reading this. And I just love Emily Henry, one of my top romance authors, and I will read anything that she writes. And then a book that I read recently, The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. They share a magical apartment. It was her aunt's apartment, and her aunt told her the story about how her apartment is magical, and she never really believed her until the same thing that her aunt described happened to her. So she walked into her aunt's apartment that's now her apartment, and a guy is standing there. So she's a little bit confused, but he is 7 years in the past. So she ends up seeing him when he's 7 years in the past, and then also in the future she runs into him, which we see later. But it was just interesting. Like, I didn't know how it was going to work with him being 7 years in the past, but you definitely understand it very quickly because she is very good at describing it. And but she's very good at describing it so it's not confusing at all. And her writing is also another one that is very unique, and she's an amazing writer, so I really enjoyed reading this. Probably two of my favorite small town romances, that is When in Rome and Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. This is part of the Rome, Kentucky series. I think there's going to be a book for every sibling. I literally love these books so much. Like, the way I felt when reading this was just, I don't know, like nothing compares to these books. I love her writing. These books were just so cute, and you're just gonna have to read them for yourself. But this one, she is a pop singer, and she decides to just get in her car and not tell anyone and drive. She takes her like car that breaks down and ends up in front of Noah's lawn, and she has to stay there until her car gets fixed. It's definitely Grumpy Sunshine, small town. They share his house together, so it's forced proximity as well. But I just love these two, and right away I went into Practice Makes Perfect. This is about Annie and Will. Will is Amelia's bodyguard, so he is teaching her, he's kind of being like her dating coach. It's kind of like the wrong Mr. Right, but he is a bodyguard, and she owns a flower shop, and everyone thinks of her as just like this sweet girl. She's super innocent, whatever, and she wants to get out of that, and he is going to help her do that. And then we have one Christmas book that I read recently, A Little Magic by Lindsay Lanza. I didn't expect to like this as much as I did, but I really enjoyed it. The story was just so much deeper than a normal Christmas romance. Like, we get to see her deal with her illness that she has dealt with since she was a little girl, and he is her brother's best friend. So he has kind of been taking care of her since he was younger. Like, I think he's 2 years older than her. They met at Sugar Valley Village. His parents owned and operated Sugar Valley Village, and something tragic happens and it closes, but then he kind of brings it back. So it is a very deep and emotional story, and it's just not a typical Christmas romance. And then we have one dark romance. This is Hooked by Emily McIntyre. This is a Peter Pan retelling, and it's kind of like the villain story. So it's about James, and his enemy is Peter, so it's Wendy's dad. He wants revenge over her dad, but he ends up falling in love with her, so he doesn't want to ruin anything. She's kind of the one that like makes him less of a villain, pretty much. But I really enjoyed that it was a Peter Pan retelling. And I have her two other books. So I have Scarred and Wretched. I think Scarred is a Lion King retelling, and then Wretched is the Wizard of Oz retelling, I think. And they're all the villain stories, and I love the villains in Disney movies. So I definitely recommend, but there's a lot of like gruesome stuff that happens in here. Like the first chapter, it's like talking about him killing someone. So if you don't like that, this might not be for you, but I definitely like this more than I thought I would. One last series. This is Gold Rush Ranch series by Elsie Silver. This is her first series before the Chestnut Springs series, which I'm sure you've seen that more than these. This is kind of like on her backlist. This is also like a small town. It's a small town romance with like horses and cowboys. This is about Billy and Vaughn. This is the first one in the series. She comes to work on his farm. He took after his grandpa after his grandpa passed, so it's his farm now, and she comes to help out. He sees the name Billy and he's expecting a man, but it ends up being her, and they definitely clash, and I would say it's enemies to lovers. It was really interesting to see a book that deals with like horse racing and horse stuff, because I don't know anything about that. But the second one is a photo finish. This is about Violet and Vaughn's brother Cole. They live in the same house. They met each other online like a couple years prior, and they figure out it's each other Violet, her brothers are the stories in Chestnut Springs, so they're kind of interconnected, and I think you can read it either way. So I think you can read Chestnut Springs first and then go into Gold Rush Ranch, or you can do the other way around. I decided to read these first before the Chestnut Springs series was completed because I didn't want to wait for another book to come out if I finished the series. So I want to read Chestnut Springs hopefully in 2024, but we will see. The third book is The Front Runner. This is about Stefan and the vet Mira. So Stefan is kind of Billy and Vaughn's enemy. He owns his own horse racing, so they're kind of competing against each other, and he ends up falling for the vet named Mira. This one is about Stefan's little sister, Nadia, and Griffin. So Griffin is best friends with Stefan, and then Nadia is Stefan's little sister. There's an age gap in here. I think it's like 14 or 15 years. And it's kind of like a forbidden romance. I think this is probably my least favorite out of all of them. I really enjoyed the first two. I think A Photo Finish, Violet's story, was definitely my favorite. But I really recommend this if you love Chestnut Springs or any small town romance. I definitely recommend you pick up the series. That's all 23 favorites of 2023. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm being stared at. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please give it a thumbs up if you did, and subscribe if you are not already. I still have some Bookmas videos coming up. We're doing 12 days, so stay tuned for tomorrow's video, and I will see you guys for Bookmas number 9. Bye!